Welcome to Searching for the Question Live. This is episode 23, In the Belly of the Dragon. My name is David Orban, and I am very glad to have you on the show. Before we start, I want to remind you that even if we are live, you can always watch the previous episodes both on Facebook and on YouTube. And on YouTube, you can also subscribe to the channel playlist. We also have a Discord community, and I invite you to join on davidorban.com/Discord. And finally, if you find the show valuable, as well as other content that I produce together with my team and the knowledge that I share, you are welcome to become a supporter on Patreon at patreon.com/davidorban. Today's guest is Peter Sherman Crosby from Beijing, China. Peter is a social entrepreneur in global media, multicultural communications, and information technologies. Currently, he's based in Beijing, and he is the executive producer, co-director, photographer, and host of the documentary television series that is planning to air on the Chinese television, Belly of the Dragon. So welcome, Peter, on Searching for the Question Live.
Hi, David. Great to see you.
Right. Absolutely. Now,
it's been a while.
We are seeing a black bar, which represents your audio. And the reason is because it is not easy to set these things up, and technology always requires little twiddling. I can show you on your own, and I can be on my own, but when we are all together, one way or another, the second you will show up where we get the audio from. But this is also characterized by experimentation, adaptation, and these days adaptability is certainly a very, very important factor in everything we do. So let's start with that. Tell us, how are you? How are you doing in Beijing, China? Are you still in lockdown? What is going on? Let's start with that, which is really one of the most important questions for our guests every episode.
Well, we share something, another thing, David, because we were very early to the COVID-19 cycle in Beijing. Literally, we started our lockdown February 2nd. Yeah, February 2nd. And so for a month, 5 weeks, we really were regimented as far as leaving our apartment building, as far as going to the grocery store, always wearing a mask, wearing blue surgical gloves whenever we had them, and your temperature being taken like a gun to the head sometimes, just to make sure that you're 36 Celsius, 98 point something Fahrenheit. And that's kind of actually reassuring to have your temperature taken 2 or 3 times a day. Now that it's spring and it's 10 weeks from the Wuhan lockdown, things have loosened up. More people are walking with their masks at half mast. More people are going shopping without any gloves. And the bank, when I go to the bank receptionist no longer comes to me in a hazmat suit. So
they used to. Wow, that's amazing.
It's feeling more human.
And in Italy as well, as we know, things have been very complex, especially in the Bergamo area where I am. And very rapidly, a few things have been adopted. The simplest, like the plexiglass wall between you and the counter, the checkout counter at the grocery store, or the fact that everybody needs to wear a mask, which wasn't at all common in Europe, of course, before. It was kind of lame that the authorities would insist that the mask is not needed. And now they are saying, yeah, the mask is very
Yeah.
much needed. And the reason they did that before is because there were not enough masks, and they were afraid that people would
Sure.
hoard, and then the healthcare workers wouldn't have the
Right.
masks that they needed. Now, one thing that I like to show on our show is where we were and where we are. So yesterday we were in Budapest, Hungary, in the middle of Europe, and today we went to Beijing, China. And I hope all of you can find both on the map. But seeing this animated on Google Earth is always wonderful. Where are you just as a quarter? Beijing has, I don't know how many people, 10 million, 20 million, but a lot of people.
To 20 million in the general metropolitan area now. And I live right in the old section of the city. The city has 6 ring roads, and I live inside the second ring road. So the area is lots of low buildings. Hutong is what they call them, right? Small little alleyways, clay tile roofs. Of course, now all the buildings have air conditioning on top of them, and many of them have been renovated inside. You wouldn't know it from the outside, but inside, many of them are just gorgeous. So,
And these
I
were
live in a
traditionally not Houston. How do you spell Houghton so that Google can find me the right images?
it should be
Oh, with the final G.
Hutong.
There you go.
Hutong. Yeah,
Yeah, I missed the final G. So am I correct
yeah.
that these were dwellings for entire families or multiple families with their internal courtyards as well?
Exactly. Not all of them have that internal courtyard. It may be more a long shared corridor, and then different families would have access to that. I've made a friend with a local fellow. He's 67. He's taking care of his 90-year-old mother. They've lived there since his childhood. His daughter lives next door. And he's very excited because now he is a Hutong millionaire. Of
Wow,
course, you can't
meaning
really
that
sell.
the paper value of the building went way up.
Yeah,
So our show is seen really a little bit all over the world. We have people saying hi. Angelo from Italy, I would assume, says buonasera. And then we have Rizwan Riaz from, I would assume, Pakistan, saying hello, David and Peter. And I invite our viewers, whether they are on Facebook or YouTube or Twitter, where we are streaming simultaneously, to both say hi as well as to send their questions that we will attempt to answer
good.
in real time. So, Peter, the you are not Chinese, right? So let's start with that. Tell me, how did you end up in Beijing, what is the path that brought you where you are?
Well, the short answer is I've just realized recently that I was in high school when Nixon came to China, right? So I was a junior or a senior in high school. And before that, we had ping pong diplomacy, the first Americans who came to China as athletes. And I think that planted a seed for me. And then 30 years ago, 1988, I actually had a bicycle accident in Los Angeles. And it just made me aware, gosh, what are things that I want to make sure that I do in my life? And going to China was one of them, riding a bicycle in China specifically. And when I came in 1988, I went to very rural China, out to Xinjiang and up in the Mongolian area, then to Chengdu and to Beijing. And I just fell in love with China. I just was delighted and welcomed and found it very warm, very generous. And then in Beijing, the bicycle lanes, no cars in the bicycle lanes. Today, even Beijing still has big bicycle lanes, but you have to fight with the scooters and the cars and the buses in the bicycle lane. But I fell in love with China.
And during these 40 years, from the 80s to the 20s, there have been just incredible changes in China. I think one of the most visible representations of this incredible change is looking at, and let me try to do that real time, the difference in Shanghai, old, new. Let's see what comes up. Well, this is not the comparison photo that I was looking for, because there are some that are just incredible, that show
Sure.
Shanghai as it was a fishing village in the 60s, and now
Yep.
we were there together, Peter, right? Just 5 or 6 years ago.
David, look what I found.
And how
Can
can
you
I share
see?
that?
I need to share. How do I?
Do you have a share
Sorry,
button on your screen?
I do. It went away
And
when I brought up the. Hold on.
and then you need to pick whether you want to share your entire screen, which probably I don't recommend, but just to share the specific window.
Okay. Firefox, it looks like, is not. Anyway, can you see that? You see a photo?
No.
Okay.
No. I see something just
Okay.
just not great.
So we're not going to share the screen. Okay. It was a photo of you and I standing on the Bund in Shanghai 5 years ago, almost to the day, David, April 15th or so.
There you go, April 15, 2015. That's us. You have a little beard, and I have no beard.
No, yes, I guess we're growing up now.
Yeah, so I will keep searching for the photo of Shanghai, new and old. In the meantime, Barbara
Sure.
says hi from New York. But
Hi, Barbara.
while I'm doing that, why don't you tell your impressions of China the old and China the new, and the source of that impression? Because if I'm not mistaken, your ability to get a deeper understanding of how China was then comes from experiences that brought you very close to people and their lives.
Yeah. After my sort of love affair with China in the late 80s, I was a photojournalist, and I was doing stories for the LA Times and AsiaWeek and different magazines in Asia. I moved to Tokyo, then to Hong Kong, and then to Beijing. And in 1993, 94, I went to film school in Beijing, mostly to study Chinese and sneak into film classes. So that was sort of a life dream come true. And then I had this idea of riding a bicycle from Beijing to Hong Kong. It's about 3,000 kilometers. So I did that. National Geographic made a television program out of it, and that was 1994. And we went through more of the center of China, through Hubei, Shaanxi, through now you know Hubei, which is the province of Wuhan, and then to Hunan, you know, the hot food, and then down south, Guizhou, Guangdong, and to Hong Kong. Yeah,
So
as
you
the
didn't do
crow
it
flies.
correct. This is a supposed airplane ride from from Beijing to Hong Kong, but yours
Uh-huh.
wasn't like that for sure.
Right. If you look at bellyofthedragon.com, you can pull up the actual charted, there should be the charted map just on the home page. There we go. Yeah, look at that. Yeah.
So this is including the stops that you made, I assume, right?
Right.
So
And back
how
then,
long did it take the bicycle trip?
it took 6 months. So I went with a partner. I'd fallen in love with a young Japanese gal, and we thought this was going to be our extended honeymoon. And the old adage of traveling together, you really get to know some people. And it took us
So
six
so
months to
she
get.
but she endured the whole trip. Well, that
She
is something.
endured. She endured the whole trip. Absolutely. She was a gamer, right? I mean, she really stayed the whole way. And then she went back to her job at the World Bank.
Okay, well,
And we had this once in a lifetime experience. Absolutely. So this
and
time,
yes.
so the reason I'm here now is to actually 25 years later to do that bicycle ride again. The roads have changed, the towns have changed, the people have changed. We've grown beards. Um, so we're making a 6-part television series with the National Television Network, and hopefully we'll be able to make a film out of that as well. Starting this summer in August or September, and 3 months. Should take us 3 months as opposed to 6 months. But the opportunity to show rural China and how that's evolved, and to be with people that I met 25 years ago who may have been children or teenagers or young adults, and to have them tell their stories about how has China changed, right? The Western perceptive, the outside perception of how China has changed, very different from how folks feel about their country's change, the modernization, the opportunities for most people in China are just vastly different in 25 years. So we want them to tell their stories.
And you mentioned to me that actually you were able to find the one of the families that you were with, maybe for a more extended amount of time back
Yeah.
then, and you found the same family, the man and woman who then were children, and you are now in touch with them, planning to go and visit.
And the remarkable thing is, and this is just an example. So we stayed with the Liu family. We stayed with the Liu family who lived at that time. They lived in a dirt house, literally a rammed by hand dirt house up in the mountains of Hubei, the same province as Wuhan. And they invited us in. It was a cold, rainy evening, and they invited us in for a hot potato and some tea, and then proceeded to insist that we stay, that we have a meal with them. Now, these people literally, they're part of an ethnic minority, the Tujia. The Tujia people literally means earth people. But you can't get much poorer than living in a dirt house. And the floor was straw. They had 3 kids, which was unusual at that time in 1994, to have 3 children. Because they were not a minority, there are 55 minority tribes, minority groups in China.
They received exceptions from the one-child policy.
They did. Most minorities were able to have 2, especially if you're in a rural area. But for their 3rd child, they were fined 3,000 renminbi. And 3,000 renminbi then would be about $450 for people who lived in a dirt house. a very substantial amount of money. And then the father had a vasectomy and the mother had a hysterectomy, and that was their last checkup.
That stopped it.
But even with that trauma, they were a joyful family living in the most difficult circumstances, and so we had an emotional connection because the father and I, because we just did, because we were just human to human, and they were very generous. But the father and I had exactly the same birthday, and so 1 year apart. He was 1 year older than I, and so that was just an affinity that was far too strange to ignore. So flash forward to 23 years ago, I decided when I came back to China, if I was going to do this project, the first thing I needed to do was find the Liu family. Liu is a family name, Yingha is his name, was to try and find them. And so I had hired an interpreter and a cameraman and a car, and we went to that area of China, remote area of China. I thought, well, we're just going to drive around.
It wasn't enough to Google them? It was not that easy?
Well, shush, you stole my punchline.
Oh.
So WeChat, right? As we're going there, the friend of a friend knows the production company in Shanghai, who knows somebody in that province, who knows the mother of somebody they went to college with. She's a party member. She has access to the census files for that county. There's only 3 Liu families in that county. And so before we even got there, they found them. We're going to have lunch tomorrow.
Wow.
And it was just, yeah, and it was touching beyond belief to have the same kind of affinity 25 years later with these folks. And then the next day, they were able to bring their 3 children, their wives, their kids, all to, I wanted to pay them back. They had given me their version of a banquet 25 years later, cooked over an open fire. And so I wanted to throw the biggest hotel banquet I could afford for them. And so that was a great joy. I mean, it was really, we don't often get to give back so directly, in kind of a karmic way.
No, I don't know how much time you spent with them after the fact, but what I imagine is that this family for 20 years or more had this legendary figure, a crazy American that spent some time with us and then left. And the children growing up, their memories got hazier and hazier, but still they would tell the stories when they were eating. And then the crazy American shows up, and the younger who have never seen him but heard the story realize that he exists. So
Yes.
It must have been quite a shock.
Well, one of the things that's interesting was the father was actually chastised for not asking us for money. Why didn't you get money from them? You're living
All
in
the Americans are ultra rich.
Exactly. Well, they would ask us, why are you riding a bicycle? Why don't you fly? You're rich. And so anyway, he was chastised at that time for allowing these strangers into their home, not getting any reward, being, sort of the pauper, the generous pauper stereotype. And so then to come back 25 years later, just like you're talking about, like this out of the fog comes this human being from the stories, was so redeeming for him, right? Here's a poor man who has lived with this is the nature of who I am, but I did, I don't take advantage of situations. And here he's redeemed in front of the eyes of his family and community. It was very touching. It was very touching for all of us to recognize that this kind of generosity, inviting someone into your home, giving them a banquet is not something that goes unrewarded.
So we have Justine saying hi from the Philippines. We
Hi,
have
Justine.
Marita from Argentina. Bravo from.
Marita is my friend.
Oh,
Hi,
really? You know her?
Marita. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay, that's
We met in
wonderful.
Buenos Aires in a jazz club. She's lovely. Hey, Marita.
There you go.
What
There
is?
you go. She's watching.
Yeah.
And we have Konstantin saying privet from, I would guess, Ukraine because of the colors on his
His
icon,
profile.
right? Yeah.
Hey,
Now,
welcome.
Justine asks a very, very interesting and important question. How do you go about making a documentary film? It is not enough to just take a camera and shoot and then go home and stay on your computer. Um, there are a lot of things, the rights, the
Considerations.
distribution, the way you are able to finance both the period of the shooting and then hopefully marketing the movie, going to festivals. Tell us more about the business of doing a documentary that I think can be very important to Justine, but also to other viewers.
That's a great question, Justine. I wouldn't advise going into documentary filmmaking as a very lucrative path because films like documentary films by like Michael Moore or this now film American Factory, which was very popular and won an Oscar in the United States last year. These are few and far between. But as far as the tactics of being able to make this film here, I started coming on business trips and started coming as a tourist 2 years ago. And carrying my camera, I'm still a photographer, carrying GoPros and just filming as much as I could. And then to find the Liu family, I hired a cameraman and an interpreter, and we just went about it ourselves and just started collecting film, had this very rich experience. And so I've now gone back to meet with that Liu family for the Lunar New Year's, or Chinese New Year's, we call it, and to be there for Autumn Festival and to be there for our birthdays. And have just been able to film that in a very low-key manner. What's happened is that this story and what I've been doing and what I've been publishing online caught the eye of a production company here, a documentary film director who's very well known. And we met at a film festival in China. And so now it's, now it's a year and a half later, and I'm working with them. And they are, he was an independent film director. His little group of people, they were bought up by another company that produces more mainstream content. And now we're partnered with the National TV network to create this 6-part television series. The film opportunity really is our sort of legacy of all that TV making, to be able to have the footage, and I'll be shooting as well to make a film going forward. We're partnered with Discovery Asia for that, but one of the things about working in China is everything can change very, very quickly, very, very easily. Not just with things like COVID, but because of the sensitivities. Also, being an American. Right now, being an American in China is a little bit more fraught and a little bit more important, frankly, that we're able to make a film or TV series that's about friendship, that's about respect, that's about understanding between Americans and Chinese people. Well, American and Chinese people.
So thank you for that answer. I actually looked up an article but about Michael Moore's 13 rules for making documentary films, and I posted it as a comment of mine to Justine's question. And so let's talk more about how you see America and China being able to keep coexisting, because the alternative with tens of thousands of nuclear warheads is pretty bleak for everybody, not only for America and China. So, do you see opportunities for strengthening or rebuilding positive relationships? How is COVID going to change, for example, supply chains, in your opinion, where so much of important or unimportant things that Americans buy was made in China? Is it still going to be the case? How do you see both political and economic aspects of this very, very important relationship?
Well, I'll start with the sort of the on the ground realities of goods being made in China. And that has been evolving because of the trade war and because China is no longer the lowest cost provider, right? China used to be the place where you go and you got your shoes made, your iPhones made, your clothes made, your television. Now, China is no longer the lowest. The laborers here now have expectations. They have more middle class pay scales. They have more skills. They're more international. And so that kind of very low labor cost has moved on to Vietnam, Cambodia, Indonesia, Pakistan, Bangladesh. There are skilled people in those countries which don't require more of a middle class income. So those supply chains have already been shifting, accelerated by the faux trade war, the trumped up trade war, and now we've had this strike force experience of goods that are critical to people's health seem secondary. They seem, these gowns, these masks, they seem like, why would those be so important, right? Why wouldn't we have those made in China or Cambodia or Vietnam? Well, now there's an answer for that. Around the world, these are essential to our nation's health, our state's health, our city's health. So I think you'll find more and more countries, municipalities, bringing more of those capacities back home for their own security, for their own safety. Not really so much political. The political then is the leadership in the United States and in China wanting to take advantage of this tragedy, frankly. Longer term, besides those supply chain considerations, the United States was allied with China in the Second World War. The United States, since 1972, has been the largest trading partner with China. There are 400,000 Chinese students in American universities now. This has been going on for 30 years. So the exchanges, the cultural understanding is a lot deeper than the political fireworks that are going on now. I think that once this COVID experience, once not the memory fades, but once the pain fades and the facts are sorted out, I think there's a real opportunity for people to recognize the commonalities in fighting things like the next pandemic, climate change, technology interoperability. So I think there's a lot of opportunities. Maybe I'm being Pollyannish. I have a tendency to have sort of rose-colored glasses about what's possible, but that's why I'm here. Try and tell that positive story, that possibility story.
And for those Americans watching this who are questioning the usefulness of trading with China, regardless of the balance of trade, the exports, the U.S. exports to China have increased tenfold as well over the course of the past 20 years. So that is quite substantial too. This is Wolfram Alpha, where you can see all kinds of cool computational results to your queries, like GDP per head of China, which I am sure went up quite a lot. And this is in logarithmic scale in US dollars per year per person from 1960 to 2018. It was $100, and now it
400?
is, oh no, 5,000 GDP per
5,000.
head.
Okay, I can't read the scale.
Actually more. Now it's 9,700 per person per year. Now this is of course GDP and not the
Per capita
income
earnings.
of income of the people or the families, and it is a big issue in many countries.
But just using metrics for a second, when I was here 25 years ago and 30 years ago, the average earning of the per capita average earning in China was less than $4,000 a year. Now it's more like $20,000 a year. So people have gone from abject poverty, under $2 a day in the UN scale of abject poverty, to more of a middle class, at least in China. Their purchasing power is what we would consider middle class. So that Saturday, what people want to do is they want to take out their little car, which may be electric, which may only have 3 wheels, or it may be a Mercedes or a BMW or a Tesla, and they want to go wash it. And they want to go take their kids for a drive, right? It's just so normal by most developed countries' standards to be able to have these amenities and this kind of freedom. But that wasn't something that was available 25 years ago.
So we have Dharma from Nepal, and we have Bert Ola from Sweden, and
hey, Bertola!
we have Muhammad who says China and America are both blaming each other for the coronavirus spread. Instead of fighting jointly, they are splitting the world. I think this is a very, very smart remark.
Exactly. Mohammed, you're absolutely reading my mind. Why can't we take responsibility and look at the future?
One thing you said caught my attention, because the spread of, for example, electric vehicles, especially small motorcycles, mopeds, but also electric buses and electric cars,
right,
in China is huge. Shanghai, for example, outlawed many years ago already internal combustion engine motorcycles in the city.
Scooters.
The scooters can only be electric. And they have now converted all the buses in Shanghai to be electric as well. And there are a lot of electric car brands unavailable in the West, and they are selling many of them in China. So it is interesting to see how certain decisions made by the Chinese administration, just like, for example, Germany drove photovoltaic solar adoption through incentives and subsidies, is accelerating sustainable infrastructure creation, in this case for transportation. So is that something that you can observe on the ground in Beijing as well?
Sure. That German solar installation boom, subsidized to lower the kilowatt hour cost, all of those photovoltaic cells, not all of them, but a huge percentage of them came from China. That built the Chinese infrastructure for solar industry now, which is now growing year by year. Wind and solar here have been growing 35%, I think, over the course of the last decade. So they're now the largest installed base of both solar and of wind in the world. Back to we started with electric cars, right? So a couple of things about electric cars. I said I went to Beijing Film Academy in 1994 to study Chinese and sneak into the film classes before I did my bicycle ride across China. In 1994, the parking lot at Beijing Film Academy was for bicycles. There would be 200 bicycles in the parking lot, and there would be people who would help you get your bicycle in and out of the tangle, right? Now, when I went back to Beijing Film Academy 2 years ago to study again, the parking lot is the largest collection of Teslas that I've seen in one place in my life. All with the electric plug-in stanchions, all ready to go. More BMWs and Mercedes. In China, you have to be a rich kid to go to Beijing Film Academy. And there, that wealth is showing off in choices which are not only, luxury brands, but electric is just much more of people's ambitions here. It's a way of showing off your sophistication. So everything from Teslas to scooters, just two-wheel scooters, which are kind of silent, and as a bicyclist, incredibly scary because they come out of nowhere behind you. You don't hear anything, and here, whoo, goes the messenger delivering someone's coffee. Woo!
And actually, in Europe, starting next year, it will be compulsory for electric vehicles to make a noise when they go above 20 miles an hour, 30 kilometers an hour. And I visited a Romanian software company about a year ago, and they work for very large corporations doing all kinds of software development. And one of their specialties is to work as a subcontractor for car makers, doing the software that makes your airbag explode the right time, not when it is not good. And they showed me the prototypes of the sounds that the electric cars will make artificially by law, and every brand, potentially every model of car, will have its own recognizable sound.
Sure.
That is now designed rather than being naturally made by the thing.
Yeah. I welcome that.
Well, I understand your concern, and obviously it is taking away some consequences that could have been interesting for cars that are electric and silent. We would have had cities that are much more, you could hear the birds singing instead of chirping.
Well, I like birds. I like you could hear the birds thinking. I actually like that. I think that's a great opportunity.
That is good too. And many science fiction movies, for example, Minority Report comes into my mind, show future cities with a lot of vehicle traffic, very, very silent. And it is not going to be exactly that because of this kind of imposition. I don't know if other countries are contemplating similar legislation, but this is coming in force in Europe already next year.
So just a funny little side note, David, because we talked about thinking birds. In Beijing, there is a tradition of carrier pigeons. And this tradition goes back 200 years or longer, where the carrier pigeons were actually used as messengers between the warlords and the armies. Now, even with all this development in the city, there's still people who keep coops of carrier pigeons on their roofs, feed them, And then in the evenings and in the morning, they let their flock out. It may be 20 or 30 or 40 birds, and they'll fly in murmuration around through the city, right? Just these beautiful waves, and they'll put a whistle on one or two of the bird's legs. So you hear this, and so I live in a place where I can see one of the old gates from Beijing. And as the sun sets, I'll have these beautiful birds doing their patterns with the Chinese gate in the background, the sunset. I'm still in love with China. What can I say? This kind of stuff tickles me, warms my heart.
Absolutely. And for me, part of the joy of traveling, do you remember when we did that? Is the ability to experience the warmth of people all over the world, probably the most important. The culture and the beauty of cities and nature, monuments and very different like waterfalls or canyons on nature in its variety. But then I don't know if it comes second or third. The diversity and the variety, the surprising things, both big but also tiny in the daily lives of people.
Sure.
For example, in many homes in America or Europe, people don't take off their shoes as enter their homes, their
Right.
houses. My daughter Jordana is now in Korea, and
You better take off your shoes.
for the first few days it was hard, but then it became so natural, and that is a little thing, but represents differences in the ways people live. What other things you would highlight in differences, whether it is obvious like food, or less obvious, like how better the Beijing subway system is compared with New York's?
Oh my gosh. Well, I'll take something that's something very present for all of us. We're all facing this COVID infection, this COVID pandemic. And so the idea of wearing a mask, right, is something that even when I lived in Japan 25 and 30 years ago, people who were sick or felt sick, like they had a cold or the flu, they would wear a mask because they wanted to protect their community, their family, their community, their coworkers. It was just a common courtesy. Nothing strange about it. And so that's pervasive throughout Asia, that kind of family, community, that outward presence of yourself being as important, if not more important, than your own egoistic, well, I don't look good in a mask. I don't need to wear a mask. Wear a mask? Who do you think I am? I'm American. I can do whatever I want. So the acceptance of the mask as a necessary protection for the community was unequivocal and fast. It was a matter of supply, not a matter of regimentation, not a matter of law. It was simply that people wanted to protect each other. And so people now here in Beijing, out of the hot zone, 10 weeks later, still are wearing masks. We may dangle the mask from one ear, or we may wear it underneath our chin as like a chin strap because we're talking to someone, but we all have masks. And I think that has to do with an outward consideration for your community first.
So I'm not going to be able to show it as an overlay because it is just too long, right? Covers all the screen. But David James Bloomberg chimes in with a contrary opinion around the effect and the necessity and the usefulness of subsidies on solar and wind. He says they led to higher electric rates, and he says that nuclear power, natural gas, and hydroelectric are more practical, economical, reliable, and environmentally sustainable if the full cost accounting context is detailed with mining rare metals, etc., etc., etc. And then he adds the point about China and USA equally responsible for spreading COVID-19 is ridiculous. Okay, and
Okay.
and we welcome comments. David, thank you for chiming in.
Well, I
So
also I just want to salute one thing that was said there around full cost accounting, right? This idea that externalities in the environment, in the social fabric, in the blood diamonds or the molybdenum that's tainted from a Civil War area, that's not accounted for in the ways that our corporations and government do business. That's a real issue. And that's a real important point of leverage, I think, for change. So I really salute that somebody else out there banging that full cost accounting drum. That's great, David. Thanks.
absolutely, and the more businesses understand that either take responsibility for those in order to generate profit for their stakeholders, or
Sure.
it will be imposed on them, right? The way maybe in the 19th century European monarchies colluded with European businesses, closing both of their eyes with regards to the destruction that they wrought through colonies that were literally depredated, is gone. Now multinationals will be held accountable. In Italy, for example, it is a minor example, but I think a good example. Ryanair used to have 300 Ryanair Airlines. Do you remember those? Used to
Sure.
have 300 employees, maybe 400 employees, and they pretended actually they were not employees because they didn't have an office in Italy. Their office was
Right. Sure.
was in Ireland. So these were they wore Ryanair
Gig
you
workers.
know, whatever they were, right?
Right.
And Italy listened to the unions, and they said, "Sorry, guys, we understand you are pushing for profit, and it is expensive to have employees in Italy, but you have employees in Italy. These are employees in Italy. Nothing that you can do
Yeah.
about it." And David is thanking us for our integrity in sharing counterpoints. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So we are close to the end of our hour together, Peter. What is the message that you would like to give to the people watching? What is that they can do after spending the time with us, both regarding your projects, but regarding their relationship with China, their ability to build bridges with people? What would you like to say in closing?
Well, first of all, thank you for tuning in, and thank you, David, for bringing me on. It's great to see you and play with you. I'd like people to check out, my our website is bellyofthedragon.com. That is really a placeholder website. It's not the full production. That's something that we're working on. We work with a television network, et cetera, but it'll give you a sense of the context and the 1994 photography and some of the photography over the last 2 or 3 years and some of the video. The thing that people who are interested in China, one of the things I think that's essential for people to understand, where does this attitude now come from? I mean, there's an attitude, Americans' righteous indignation, but also in China, there's a sense of the history, especially of the last 100 years, is very different than how Chinese people view their history as one of the largest, if not the largest, economies, civilizations, histories in the world. And the Western experience of China over the last 100 years is that China is a place to get your things done, made cheaply, is a place where we can have foreign concessions, right? The British can come in and bomb China and then own Hong Kong. There is a deep sense of, they call it 100 years of humiliation in China. You know, that's a little bit dramatic, but in the context of 5,000 years of history, they want people to understand that China is coming back to a position that is held historically in the culture of the world, in the place of the world. And so I think studying the history, not even studying, just reading up about it, will give people a better sense of just an understanding of the positions that, you know, the nation is presenting. And then people are people, right? People want their kids to go to school. They want their mom and dad to be healthy. They want to have a good life. It's not so extraordinary that China's growth is driven by small entrepreneurs at the ground level. And, people are people. Come to China, meet the people, eat the food, and you'll love it.
Certainly we are looking forward to be able to come to China from many places. And I'm sure China wants us to come as well. The ability to travel will be restored, and we will see how fast and what kind of new rituals we will go through. Maybe not only being checked with a thermometer, but we may have to produce a new kind of immunity passport, right? There may come a time when our mobile phones are including, or wearables are including new kinds of sensing ability where they can constantly monitor our well-being. And that will be good not only for getting on a plane, but it will be good for us. Being able to know that you are well is going to be greatly enhanced as a consequence of the crisis that we are going through. So, Peter, thank you very much for being with us, and
My pleasure.
I'm looking forward to learn more about the adventures in the belly of the dragon in the future.
Thank you, David. This has been great fun, and good to see you again.
Thank you. Absolutely. So thanks for watching this episode of Searching for the Question Live, and for the numerous remarks and questions. And I want to invite you to join also tomorrow when we will be in Switzerland, and we will talk about technology becoming ever more powerful, and how can you take advantage of technology, not only using it in your life, but does it represent an investment opportunity? As a matter of fact, you can come to davidorban.com/SFTQL, that stands for Searching for the Question Live, and vote for the next guest on the URL/guest vote. You can also add the guest you would like to see, and we can crowdsource the future episodes together. You can join our group chat on davidorban.com/discord. And if you like the show and the knowledge that it shares, the points of view that it popularizes, or that it wants to document in one way or another, you are welcome to support the show on Patreon by going to patreon.com/davidorban. Thank you very much, and see you tomorrow.